On this episode of One-on-One, we're going to talk with the president of E.D. White, Tim Robichaux. You might recall we had his father on some 20 years ago, so it will be an interesting discussion. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back with Tim Robichaux. Don't go away. One-on-One is brought to you by the Law Office of Waits and Downer. And welcome back to One-on-One. My guest today, Tim Robichaux, the president of E.D. White. Tim, good to have you here.
Great to be here, Martin. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, and you do such a great job, and you're always visible, and you come from a good background.
I do
no
come
doubt
from a
about
good
it.
background. Oh, yeah, my family.
I guess to start off for the audience, take me through the progression. Let's start with the earliest years you can remember.
Okay.
I guess we'll start before you can remember. Where were you born?
I was born in Thibodeau. I lived on 226 St. Charles Street, which was directly across from Mount Carmel Academy. So I had a affinity, I guess, for the Mount Carmel and the Carmelites from early on. Yeah. My dad was Gibbons Robichaux, right. My mom Joanne Hebert, and I went to St. Joseph Catholic Elementary School, then went to E.D. White, where I met my wife, and then progressed on to Nichols and graduated with a degree in accounting.
Who did you marry? What was your wife's maiden name?
Michelle Gann. Her dad was a professor at Nichols. They moved from Oklahoma when she was 5. Met her at E.D. White. So, yeah.
Education was a big part of your life.
Yes. My dad actually had a degree in English and was a teacher for a while, but he was also a musician.
Yes.
And at one point, I think he just decided, you know what, I'm going to go with the musician part. And he was a professional organist. Mm-hmm. Played for St. Joseph Co-Cathedral for 50 years. He was an organist there for 50 years.
And a great one.
He was very good. He could play the piano. Some of my favorite memories was when the electricity would go out and he would sit at the piano for an hour, 2 hours with no music and just play.
It's hard to play the organ when the electricity goes out. Right?
Yes.
Unless you have a generator.
Exactly, yes. But he was very involved in the church. He not only was the organist there, but he was he helped in the office, helped put out the bulletin and stuff like that. And interestingly enough, at that time, many people had the organist play at their reception too, which is, I think about that now it's mostly bands or stuff like that. But yeah, he played for many receptions. So the weekends, especially in the summers, he was playing weddings and wedding receptions.
And I just want to say for the audience, I'm dressed in black with a black tie, and I asked my crew, what's this about? Tim got it right.
All
the
right.
Brothers of the Sacred Heart. I was just sending a clear message because we were all surrounded by the brothers.
Yes.
And surrounded by the Mount Carmel nuns.
Yes.
And well, what a combination.
Yeah, we are very fortunate at E.D. White to have both of those charisms in our school. The Sisters of Mount Carmel was the girls' school, right? And Thibodeau College was the boys' school, run by the brothers, run by the sisters. Well, 1963, 64, the decision was made to merge the two schools, which was a very interesting thing because the brothers and the sisters had to come together. Actually, the school was designed to have a boys' side and a girls' side. And the first couple of years, they had a boys' principal and a girls' principal. And then it was decided that they would put the two together. But the Carmelites bring us a very prayerful, contemplative prayer life, which brings us much joy, even to the present day. Mm-hmm. The Brothers of the Sacred Heart were more on how to run a school, the teaching philosophies. And so we have both of those together.
Brothers were very good with discipline.
Oh yeah, discipline, yes. But you know, their whole philosophy was if there is discipline, there's gonna be a better environment to learn in. So
I would have to agree.
Yes,
100%.
Yes, because you were Brothers of Sacred Heart School as well.
Don't mess with the brothers.
You're right.
Yeah, they were good. They were just very calculated.
Right.
Most of them would have made great accountants.
Absolutely.
Took care of everything.
Very structured.
Right.
Knew how to put on assemblies, masses, events, and just their teaching philosophy of how develop relationships with students and parents and developing the whole child.
As you went through school, who were some of the people in your class that we know today?
Recently, our alumnus of the year was Mark Richard. He is the president of Halliburton, and he's living in Houston, so he visited recently and spent some time with us. Mr. Jerry Leday, president and CEO of Synergy Bank, was in my class as well. We had a number of judges. Judge Chris Boudreau is in that class. It was a class of 1979. It was a good class.
Yeah, no doubt. Seems like classes that excel also have a little competition to see, in a fun way,
Yes.
who can outdo the other one and get together at the reunions and go, you did well, but
Yeah.
I did a little better.
Well, what's interesting is that at the 30th reunion, we had a reunion with the class of 1980, which I thought was interesting. And we've also had one with the class of 1978. And it's interesting because we all know a lot of those people. So there was some kind of some competition between those classes as well.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm. It's funny because being a Vanderbilt graduate, a lot is made about the rivalry, but as you move into college and you move past,
We're all the same. Brother
the
schools.
rivalry is almost a phantom. You know, it was probably made bigger by Coach Zush and Coach Morvant when he came to Vanderbilt because he was an E.D. White graduate, beloved over there. So, but when you get into college,
They're all friends.
Yeah.
Well, even before, now a lot of the students are on travel teams with all the travel teams, and they're on teams together sometimes. And so they know, a lot of the kids know each other. So it's a good rivalry on the field, but we're brother schools.
I couldn't hate E.D. White because all my cousins went to
There you
E.D.
go.
White.
That's
when
true.
we go visit my grandma and
That's
grandpa
true.
in Thibodeau, there's all the cousins from E.D. White coming over. So I'm sorry, just
Right.
never could
That's
get
right.
into
That's
when
right.
I'd hear people at Vanderbilt hating on E.D. White, I just never
Yeah,
could.
that's right. Me either.
Yeah.
Me either. It was always a great. I was in the band when I was at E.D. White, so we had a great rivalry even there. But it was.
What'd you play?
I played trombone.
Okay.
I was a trombone player.
Well, how did you escape the piano and the organ that your daddy was so involved in?
Well, actually, I think it was fourth grade. I did take piano lessons and organ lessons, but not from my dad. He wouldn't teach me early on. He sent me to someone else. And we took a music test, and I scored a perfect score. And the band director at the time, Mr. Easton LaBeouf, said, well, you need to play trombone because on trombone, you have to have a good ear because it's a slides, it's not valves, so you have to have a really good ear. I really think he said that because he needed trombone players, so I think that was the reason why, and it started, and I loved it. It's a great instrument.
You're right, but that slide, you got to know, feel where to go. You almost got to feel into the chord, right?
There's certain positions, but to have it in tune, it's a great thing because you actually have the tuning slide in your hand.
And music is often overlooked in schools.
Yes.
Not so much at E.D. White or Vanderbilt or whatever, because you've had great programs over the years, but so much emphasis back in the day was on athletics.
Yes.
But the bands worked equally as hard, if not harder,
Yes.
than the football team, but they were often overlooked.
Yeah.
Not so much today.
Not so much today, but it's still, I think it's part of our culture. We're living in South Louisiana. Football, obviously, all sports are a big part of our culture, but music is a huge part of the culture too. Thibodeau and Homer had vibrant music communities early on, brass bands and different things like that. So the music is a very big part of my life. My dad was a musician. I ended up being a band director, leaving the business world to be a band director, and it was just a big part of my life. And everywhere you go, music is there. Think about it. When you get in the car, you put music on with on the radio. If you go to any events, try to go watch a movie without the music soundtrack.
Try to go to a football game.
Football game. I mean, the LSU band is as part of the whole atmosphere as anything in an LSU game. So music's a big part. And it's a great thing because the students especially can express emotions that they may not be able to express by speaking. And so it allows a student as an adolescent to be able to express themselves with a musical instrument. So music is a great thing to have in high school.
Did your wife play an instrument?
My wife played clarinet, and she played in college as well, just as I did.
Yeah.
Yes.
So did y'all ever get home and just play music together, or was that like off work?
Not really. We sing together sometimes, but the trombone and the clarinet are not, unless you had a couple of other instruments.
Right.
And my two sons played trombone, my daughter played trumpet. So, we need to probably get together and try to play something one day,
It's probably an easy answer for you because you had music all around. But when did you know that you were gravitating towards music, and when did you figure out, hey, I might want to be a band director?
Well, I'm glad you asked because it's a very interesting story. I graduated in accounting. Always loved business, still do, love numbers, but I always wanted to be a teacher. And when I guess going through high school and early college, I kind of made that known, but I was not pushed in the direction of education. So I ended up getting a degree in accounting. My wife was in dental school. My wife's a dentist. She was in dental school, so we moved to New Orleans for 2 years. So I worked for a CPA firm for 2 years, a regional CPA firm in New Orleans, but still wanted to teach, but never thought of music. Moved back to Thibodeau. I worked at McDermott. When McDermott was vibrant in Amelia, I worked at McDermott for 2 years. And then I worked at Allstate Insurance Company for 14 years here in Houma. They had a claims office, and I became a claims adjuster and ended up being into management in that office. My oldest son, Michael, was entering E.D. White in 1999. I remember this vividly. Mr. Raul Prado was the band director there, and he was my band director in college. He was working at E.D. White as a teacher, and they asked him to be the band director to somewhat resurrect the program. And it kind of slipped a little bit, and they wanted him to do it. So he knew my son was coming in, so he called me and said, Tim, look, I know you're busy, but you think you could come help out at band camp? I'm trying to resurrect this program. I really need some help. Your son's coming in. Could you maybe come to help on the marching field? And I was taken aback, like, really? I haven't even thought about doing that. So I was busy. I was a manager. I was traveling a good bit. I said, look, Mr. Prado, I would love to, but I really don't have time. Well, the Lord intervened in that because he kept calling me. And finally, I said, look, I'll take an afternoon off, Tuesday, Thursday, they have marching rehearsals, and I'll come out and help you. I walked out onto the practice field. I get chills thinking about it now. And it started, and I was somewhat at a loss because I really hadn't done that, but I remember being in the marching band, so and I was like, if I felt something like, man, I love doing this. This is great. The kids were great. It was just fun to hear the music and be involved in that. I guess being in the business where you kind of forget about that. Look, I went back the next day and rearranged my schedule so that I could be at more of these rehearsals. I mean, it was really something. I was spending time there. I just wanted to be a part of it. I was going to the marching festivals with them.
Where your heart was.
Yes, and I didn't know it at the time. Until then, I was 38, 39 years old.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm.
Things go a couple of years, and I'm spending a lot of time there. My wife's even asking me, why are you spending so much time there? I said, I just love it. So, and Mr. Prado was kind of like, man, you need to consider doing something like this. Like I can tell you're really enjoying it. About a year after that, Allstate Insurance Company came down and said, we're closing the office in Houma, our claims office. You're not losing your job, but you're gonna have to travel to Metairie every day. And so I started thinking to myself, my kids were getting ready to go to E.D. White. It's the most active part of my time, probably as being a parent, that if I go to do this, I'm gonna leave at 5:30 in the morning, I'm gonna get back at 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. I'm not gonna be at any of their events or anything like that. So I literally was looking at ways. And I remember walking with my wife around the neighborhood. I said, I think I wanna be a band director. She almost, she said, are you crazy? I said, you can't afford to do that. Well, interestingly enough, she was a dentist and ended up changing her profession to be a professor. She's a professor at Nichols. So she entered the education field as well. So she's like, well, you know what?
Similar
She
thing.
did the same kind of thing a few years before that, same progression. She says, but we can't afford it. How are we going to afford it? I mean, you know, you're working as a manager. I was making good money. Well, Allstate said, look, you've been at Allstate for 14 years. If you want, we'll give you a severance if you would like to leave. The severance was just enough money for me to go back to school. I needed about 1.5 years to get all of my music credits. I went to E.D. White. I talked to Mr. David Boudreaux. He says, man, look, Mr. Prado wanted to go 5 years. He says, if you do this, I mean, I can't guarantee it, but I mean, there's a good shot. You could be the band director at E.D. White. Sure enough, I went back to school at 39, back to Nichols as a non-traditional student at 39 for 1.5 years. Got all of my music. Mr. Prado stepped away, ended up being the band director. And
That's an
absolutely,
incredible story.
absolutely loved it. Loved it.
Mr. Raul Prado
Yes.
lived right down the road from Mom and Dad.
Is that
Denny
right?
Prado, his son.
Sure.
Me and Denny were good
Yeah.
friends. I learned how to play Jeremiah Was a Bullfrog in Mr. Prado's house, but
Oh,
that's
no.
not the funny story. When I got to Nichols and I said, I'm gonna take music theory. It's gonna be a piece of cake.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna fly through that, make an A. We go to Nichols, Mr. Raul Prado's the teacher. It was not that easy.
Most people don't realize it's when you get into it, it's actually very difficult and it's very intricate, and there's a lot of things involved in it. So most people that think I was in a band in high school, I can do this. Well, not so much. It's
And he
pretty
was sort of
difficult.
strict.
Yes. Oh, he was strict. He was old
He was
school.
a stickler.
He was old school, but man, could he produce some sound from students.
So that is an unusual story, how intervention, but everything sort of went your way.
I watched Father PJ's, part of Father PJ's interview he did, and he made a comment that God is there, and you just have to realize that he's setting you up. And there's no doubt that for me to be able to move from the arena where I was as a business manager to a high school band director, when you think about it, it blows my mind as well. Things had to work out perfectly, because if Allstate doesn't decide to move, then I don't get the severance that allows me to go back, and I may still be working at Allstate
But
to
to
this
me,
day.
you know what the intangible was in that whole thing? Your wife had a similar move. If your wife would not have had a similar move,
She might have said,
"No
I don't
way."
think we can do it. It's interesting, we were worried about money,
Yeah.
and not one time did it affect us money-wise. I don't know whether God just did the right things, and you know, you don't make as much as a high school teacher, you know, but I wasn't working in Houma. I didn't have to wear suits. I wasn't going to lunch every day, so I guess I was spending a little bit more money than I thought. My kids were going to school there. It was just a perfect transition. So I was able to be there when they went through school.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm. This one-on-one program has been brought to you by the law offices of Waits and Downer.